Good morning. We have another chapter, Princess and the Goblin, to read today. We're going to hear about Curdy after he left Irene and her grandmother. Remember, he didn't believe that Irene's grandmother was actually there. He didn't even see her, strangely enough. So we'll see what his conversation with his parents is like when he goes home. So this is chapter 23 in your books. If you've got your own copy, you can follow along. Now Curdy went up the mountain, neither whistling nor singing, for he was vexed with Irene for taking him in, as he called it, and he was vexed with himself for having spoken to her so angrily. His mother gave a cry of joy when she saw him, and at once set about getting him something to eat, asking him questions all the time, which he did not answer so cheerfully as usual. When his meal was ready, she left him to eat it and hurried to the mine to let his father know he was safe. When she came back, she found him fast asleep upon her bed, nor did he wake until his father came home in the evening. Now, Curdy, his mother said, as they sat at supper, tell us the whole story from beginning to end, just as it all happened. Curdy obeyed and told everything to the point where they came out upon the lawn in the garden of the king's house. And what happened after that? Asked his mother. You haven't told us all. You ought to be very happy at having got away from those demons, and instead of that, I never saw you so gloomy. There must be something more. Besides, you do not speak of that lovely child as I should like to hear you. She saved your life at the risk of her own, and yet somehow you don't seem to think much of it. But she talked such nonsense, answered Curdy, and told me a pack of things that weren't a bit true, and I can't get over it. Well, what were they? Asked his father. Your mother may be able to throw some light upon them. Then Curdy made a clean breast of it and told them everything. They all sat silent for some time, pondering the strange tale. At last Curdy's mother spoke. You confess, my boy, she said. There is something about the whole affair you do not understand? Yes, of course, mother, he answered. I cannot understand how a child, knowing nothing about the mountain, or even that I was shut up in it, should come all that way alone, straight to where I was, and then, after getting me out of the hole, lead me out of the mountain too, where I should not have known a step of the way if it had been as light as in the open air. So why is he so confused? He should know the mountain so much better than Irene, yet she really understood it well and was able to get them out. So his mother says, then you have no right to say that what she told you was not true. She did take you out of the cave, and she must have had something to guide her. Why not a thread as well as a rope or anything else? There is something you cannot explain, and her explanation might be the right one. So she doesn't doubt Irene as much as Curdy. It's no explanation at all, mother, and I can't believe it. That may be only because you do not understand it. If you did, you would probably find it was an explanation and believe it thoroughly. I don't blame you for not being able to believe it, but I do blame you for fancying such a child would try to deceive you. Why should she? Depend upon it, she told you all that she knew. Until you had found a better way of accounting for it all, you might at least have been more sparing of your judgment. Do you agree with Curdy's mother? I think that she's wise in saying this. She's saying, she's been a really trustworthy person and she got you out of that cave, and maybe her explanation is true, even if it sounds crazy to you. That is what something inside me has been saying all the time, said Curdy, hanging down his head. But what do you make of the grandmother? That is what I can't get over. To take me up to an old garret and try to persuade me against the sight of my own eyes that it was a beautiful room with blue walls and silver stars and no end of things in it, when there was nothing there but an old tub and a withered apple and a heap of straw and a sunbeam. It was too bad. She might have had some old woman there at least to pass for her precious grandmother. So he's saying she should have at least tried a little harder to make, this story make more sense. but we know what really happened, and Irene was telling the truth, he just can't see it. Now, didn't she speak as if she saw those other things herself, Curdy? Yes, that's what bothers me. You would have thought she really meant and believed that she saw every one of those things she talked about, and not one of them was there. It was too bad, I say. Perhaps some people can see things other people can't see, Curdy, said his mother very gravely. I'll tell you something I saw myself once, only perhaps you won't believe me either. Oh, mother, cried Curdy, bursting into tears. I don't deserve that, surely. But what I'm going to tell you is very strange, persisted his mother. And if, having heard it, you were to say, must have been dreaming, I don't know that I should have any right to be vexed with you, though I know at least that I was not asleep. She's saying, I know this story I'm about to tell you is true, but it's okay if you don't believe me. It is a crazy kind of story. Do please tell me, Mother, Freddie says. Perhaps it will help me to think better of the princess. That's why I'm tempted to tell you, replied his mother. But first, I may as well mention that, according to old whispers, there is something more than common about the king's family, and the queen was of the same blood, for they were cousins of some degree. There were strange stories told concerning them, all good stories, but strange, very strange. What they were, I cannot tell, for I only remember the faces of my grandmother and my mother as they talked together about them. There was wonder and awe, not fear, in their eyes, and they whispered and never spoke aloud. But what I saw myself was this. Your father was going to work in the mine one night, and I had been down with his supper. It was soon after we were married, and not very long before you were born. He came with me to the mouth of the mine and left me to go home alone, for I knew the way almost as well as the floor of our own cottage. It was pretty dark, and in some parts of the road where the rocks overhung, nearly quite dark. But I got along perfectly well, never thinking of being afraid, until I reached a spot you know well enough, Curdy, where the path has to make a sharp turn out of the way of a great rock on the left-hand side. When I got there, I was suddenly surrounded by about half a dozen of the cobs, or goblins, the first time I'd ever seen them, although I had heard tell of them often enough. One of them blocked up the path, and they all began tormenting and teasing me in a way that makes me shudder to think of even now. If I'd only been with you, cried both father and son in a breath. The mother gave a funny little smile and went on. We'll see why she does that in a bit. They had some of their horrible creatures with them, too, and I must confess I was dreadfully frightened, sorry. They had torn my clothes very much, and I was afraid they were going to tear myself to pieces, when suddenly a great white soft light shone upon me. I looked up. A broad ray, like a shining road, came down from a large globe of silvery light. Not very high up, indeed, not quite so high as the horizon, so it could not have been a new star or another moon or anything of that sort. The cobs dropped persecuting me and looked dazed, and I thought they were going to run away, but presently they began again. The same moment, however, down the path from the globe of light came a bird, shooting like silver in the sun. It gave a few rapid flaps first, and then, with its wings straight out, shot sliding down the slope of the light. It looked to me just like a white pigeon. But whatever it was, when the cobs caught sight of it coming straight down upon them, they took to their heels and scampered away across the mountain, leaving me safe, only much frightened. As soon as it had sent them off, the bird went gliding again up the light, and the moment it reached the globe, the light disappeared, just as if a shutter had been closed over a window, and I saw it no more. But I had no more trouble with the cobs that night or ever after. What does it sound like this is? It sounds very much like Irene's grandmother, this globe light that she has in her room, but that Irene has seen outside before, and a pigeon. And we know that Irene's grandmother has all of these pigeons that come to her. How strange, exclaimed Gertie. Yes, it was strange, but I can't help believing it, whether you do or not, said his mother. It's exactly as your mother told it to me the very next morning, said his father. So all those years ago, the story has not changed. You don't think I'm doubting my own mother, cried Gertie. There are other people in the world quite as well worth believing as your own mother, said his mother. Who do you think she's referring to? Irene. He shouldn't just believe his mom. He should believe Irene too. I don't know that she's so much fitter to be believed that she happens to be your mother, Mr. Gertie. There are mothers far more likely to tell lies than the little girl I saw talking to the primroses a few weeks ago. If she were to lie, I should begin to doubt my own word. But princesses have told lies as well as other people, said Gertie. Yes, but not princesses like that child, she says. She's a good girl, I'm certain, and that's more than being a princess. Depend upon it, you will have to be sorry for behaving so to her. You ought at least to have held your tongue, she says. So even if he didn't believe her, he should have at least stayed quiet and not offended her. And you know how Irene was trying to listen to him and understand, not just be understood? He should have done that too. He should have listened to Irene, and even if he didn't believe yet, try to understand her. I am really sorry now, answered Gertie. You ought to go and tell her so then. I don't see how I could manage that. They wouldn't let a minor boy like me have a word with her alone, and I couldn't tell her before that nurse of hers. She'd be asking ever so many questions, and I don't know how many the little princess would like me to answer. She told me that Ludi didn't know anything about her coming to get me out of the mountain. I am certain she would have prevented her somehow if she had known it. But I may have a chance before long, and meantime I must try to do something for her. I think, Father, I've got on the track at least. Have you indeed, my boy? Said Peter. I'm sure you deserve some success. You've worked very hard for it. What have you found out? Now we're going to hear what he has found out in the caves. It's difficult, you know, Father, inside the mountain, especially in the dark, and not knowing what turns you have taken to tell the lies of things outside. Impossible, my boy, without a chart or at least a compass, returned his father. Well, I think I've nearly discovered in what direction the Cobbs are mining. So remember, there's a couple of plans, and they are mining in the direction of something as the first plan. The second one is to flood the mine. If I am right, I know something else that I can put to it. And then 1 and 1 will make 3. So he's just looking for that last piece. They very often do, Curdy. Miners ought to be very well aware. Now tell us, my boy, what the 2 things are and see whether we can guess the third as you. At the same third as you. I don't see what that has to do with the princess, interposed his mother. I will soon let you see that, mother. Perhaps you may think me foolish, but until I am sure there is nothing in my present fancy, I am more determined than ever to go on with my observations. Just as we came to the channel by which we got out, I heard the miners at work somewhere near. I think down below us. Now, since I began to watch them, they have mined a good half-mile in a straight line, and so far as I am aware, they are working in no other part of the mountain. But I never could tell in what direction they were going. When we came out in the king's garden, however, I thought at once whether it was possible they were working towards the king's house. And what I want to do tonight is to make sure whether they are or not. I will take a light with me. Oh, Curdy, cried his mother, then they will see you. I'm no more afraid of them now than I was before, rejoined Curdy, now that I've got this precious shoe. They can't make another in such a hurry, and 1 bare foot will do for my purpose. Woman as she may be, I won't spare her next time. But I shall be careful with my light, for I don't want them to see me. I won't stick it in my hat. Go on, then, and tell us what you mean to do. I mean to take a bit of paper with me and a pencil, and go in at the mouth of the stream by which we came out. I shall mark on the paper as near as I can the angle of every turning I take until I find the cobs at work, and so get a good idea in what direction they are going. If it should prove to be nearly parallel with the stream, I shall know it is towards the king's house they are working. And what if you should? How much wiser will you be then? She asked. Wait a minute, mother dear. I told you that when I came upon the royal family in the cave, they were talking of their prince, Harelip, they called him, marrying a sun woman, meaning a human. That means one of us, one with toes to her feet. Now, in the speech one of them made that night at their great gathering, of which I heard only a part, he said that peace would be secured for a generation at least by the pledge the prince would hold for the good behavior of her relatives. That's what he said, and he must have meant the sun woman the prince was to marry. Now, I am quite sure the king is much too proud to wish his son to marry anybody but a princess, and much too knowing to fancy that his having a peasant woman for a wife would be of any great advantage to them. Now I see what you're driving at, said his mother. What's the plan? To steal Irene, kidnap her, to marry Harelip, the Goblin prince. But, said his father, our king would dig the mountain to the plain before he would have his princess, the wife of a cob, even if he were 10 times a prince. Yes, but they think so much of themselves, said his mother. Small creatures always do. The bantam is the proudest cock in my little yard. The smallest rooster. And I fancy, said Curdie, if they once got her, they would tell the king they would kill her, except he consented to the marriage. They might say so, said his father, but they wouldn't kill her. They would keep her alive for the sake of the hold it gave them over our king. Whatever he did to them, they would threaten to do the same to the princess. And they're bad enough to torment her just for their own amusement. I know that, said his mother. Anyhow, I will keep a watch on them and see what they are up to, said Curdie. It's too horrible to think of. I daren't let myself do it. But they shan't have her. At least if I can help it. So, mother dear, my clue is all right. Will you get me a bit of paper and a pencil and a lump of peas pudding, and I will set out at once. I saw a place where I can climb over the wall of the garden quite easily. Now you must mind and keep out of the way of the men on the watch, said his mother. That I will. I don't want them to know anything about it. They would spoil it all. The cobs would only try some other plan. They're such obstinate creatures. I shall take good care, mother. They won't kill and eat me either, if they should come upon me. So you needn't mind them. His mother got him what he had asked for, and Curdie set out. Close beside the door by which the princess left the garden for the mountain stood a great rock, and by climbing it, Curdie got over the wall. He tied his clue to a stone just inside the channel of a stream, and took his pickaxe with him. He had not gone far before he encountered a horrid creature across the mouth. The spot was far too narrow for 2 of almost any size or shape, and besides, Curdie had no wish to let the creature pass. Not being able to use his pickaxe, however, he had a severe struggle with him, and it was only after receiving many bites, some of them bad, that he succeeded in killing the goblin with his pocket knife. It was only because he needed to go through and save the princess. And sadly, he needed to do that to defend his life. Now, having dragged him out, he made haste to get in again before another should stop up the way. I need not follow him farther in this night's adventure. He returned to his breakfast, satisfied that the goblins were mining in the direction of the palace, on so low a level that their intention must, he thought, be to burrow under the walls of the king's house and rise up inside of it. So they're going to go through the floor, is the plan. In order, he fully believed, to lay hands on the little princess and carry her off for a wife for their horrid harlot. And that's the end of chapter 23. So Curdie seems to have a good understanding of what the goblin's plan is. We'll see if they're successful. In the next chapter, Irene behaves like a princess. We'll see it return to Irene. So it seems as if Irene, they've called her a true princess before because she tells the truth. Curdie has started to really believe Irene, even if he doesn't see the grandmother yet. He trusts Irene and believes that she wouldn't be telling a lie, basically. So I've got a couple questions I wanted to go through before we finish up. Now, how does Curdie's mother think Curdie should have reacted to Irene's story? What would you say? It seems like she thinks listen to her, really believe what she, or not necessarily believe what she has to say, but try to understand and hold your tongue rather than saying something rude because you don't believe the other person. Now, what happened to her the night she saw the light in the sky? What do you say? She sees this globe of light in the sky, like a moon, which we've seen from Irene's grandmother before, and a pigeon, and it led the way safely home, and she's not seen any goblins since then. She's not been scared by them at all. And what does Curdie suppose is the goblin's plan? Well, there's two plans. The first one is to dig into the king's house, kidnap the princess, and make her marry Harlot, the goblin prince. And the second plan, as always, has been to flood the mines if that does not work. Those are their two ways of getting back. And why did Curdie kill the goblin? He had to save himself, and there was only room for one to pass. And so he struggled, he was wrestling with him, and eventually killed the goblin in order to make it to the princess safely. All right, that is all for your reading. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.